Here is just show you how to find your experience in the book, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to show you how I find my experience in the book. So I'm not telling you what the book says, I'm just going to show you how I find what it says to me and encourage you to have your experience with it. Does that make sense? If we both do our job, we will share a spiritual experience in this room tonight. How many of you have been here before and can witness for these folks that happens? Very good. So there's a bunch of them raising their hands, those of you that are joining us online. When we talk about a spiritual experience in 12-step recovery, we're not talking about something conceptual. We're talking about something sensory, tangible. You will feel it. When you do, I'll know, and I'll call it to your attention. Because we would cheat you to talk to you about the power we call God without a demonstration of the power. Fair enough? And tonight we're in step 12, but before we launch into that, who's members in here tonight? How many members we got in here? Very good. Hello. Thank you guys, and men and women, appreciate you coming out. And you, if you haven't been told, tell your fellow members, your families are welcome here. We open the doors at 6:15. You can spend time with your family and then bring them into the meeting so you get to see them and let them see you, in addition to the rest of your experience, especially you guys in the first 30 days when you're waiting on passes. They can at least come here, and they can also come on Saturday to the Recovery Church. Those of you that are inclined, we have an Easter service this weekend. Chaplain Lee's going to officiate Saturday night, and your family's welcome there too. In fact, Chaplain Lee officiates every night. Those of you who are members, if you need to talk to him during the day, you know how to find him, I assume. And if not, ask one of us and we'll get you pointed in that direction. I think that's all. There is a meeting, a position of neutrality discussion group where Brian and Wayne work every Monday to try and help people get a better experience, kind of get past their doubt and prejudice. So if I'm going too fast for you, see them on Monday night and they'll help you kind of break it down too. Brian and Wayne, position of neutrality discussion group, and it's in one of these ballrooms every Monday night. Yeah, guys? Yeah. All right, so tonight we're going to take a look at step 12. And in step 12, we have to go to chapter 7, page 89, a little chapter called Working with Others. So, let's start with what the authors have to say. You're going to find that these authors give a lot of promises and conditions. And the only reason I point that out to you is that over the years, if all you do is fellowship, you'll go in fellowship halls and you'll see things hung on the wall that say the promises or the 12 promises. And you've got to understand that whoever did that, although they were probably trying to help, it's a bit deceptive. Because there's not just 12 promises, and there's not the promises. There's the 9th step promises, which is what they called the promises. And then there's promises and conditions throughout the whole book that are telling us what's happening as the Spirit reveals itself to us through us. Does that make sense? And so if people are, I just had a man ask me tonight, I'm having these struggles with the way I ought to act, and I don't know the difference between good and bad, and the reality is, yes, you do, but it's so new to actually give a shit about the difference between good and bad that it causes us to question ourselves. But that is a revelation of the Spirit within you. Make sense? And I'm just sharing you what his struggle is, because every one of you by your laughter can relate to exactly that experience of thinking like you but behaving like him. Yeah? Okay. All right, so they start out with a promise and condition. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. So how many of you found a promise there? How many of you found more than one? Okay, so someone shout out. What did we find? What's promised?
It works when other things fail.
Intensive work with another alcoholic works when other activities fail. Do you notice how they also promised in that same sentence that other activities will fail? Didn't say if, it said when. How many of you did everything you thought you were supposed to do, went to meetings, called the sponsor, went off the rails? How many of you neglected the intensive work with another alcoholic? Sometimes that happens, right? Okay, and then it goes on to say that this is our 12th suggestion, comma. So their 12th suggestion is not the selfish reason that nothing ensures immunity, because otherwise they would have put it after the comma. So the selfish reason, as an addict of the hopeless variety, I might want to work intensively with others is because I would like some immunity given my history. Come on, this is a room full of people who understand immunity. Okay. That's a good thing. Okay, so carry this message to other alcoholics. What message? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics. I'm going to carry the message of a spiritual awakening, what the awakening looked like and felt like through me, why I'm now endeavoring to talk to you. And the biggest reason I'm endeavoring to talk to you is nothing so much ensures immunity from drinking as my intensive work with you. So I'm here to serve. Yes? Make sense? Okay. So you can help when no one else can. How many of you have had someone ask you to help? And you said, yeah, I know a guy. Let me call them. Come on. That crap happens to me all the time. Hey, I had a guy call me and ask me if he'd work with me. I told him about you. I said, you're supposed to tell them about God. And if they came to you, apparently you're uniquely qualified to take them through their process. Or they wouldn't have come to you. So some of you got that. Who got that? I mean, like, got convicted. That we want you to know that, right? That's the Spirit in you. That's not happening from up here. All right, so you can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they're very ill. Why'd they remind me of that? Their illness is going to disturb me, isn't it? How many of you working with somebody found them disturbing? How many of you can imagine that people working with you found you disturbing? That's how we're uniquely qualified. We've been through some very difficult and painful experiences which empowered us to avert suffering for thousands more, properly armed with the facts about ourselves. Make sense? Okay. So it says life will take on new meaning. How many of you need life to take on new meaning from time to time? These aren't theories, guys. This is the facts from their experience. This is them carrying a message to us all these years later. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. Notice how they talked about all the things I was going to watch, but they called it an experience that I must not miss. Why do you think they did that? They used the words they meant. They meant the words they said. They're very intentional about their wording. How many of you have, as you've grown in the Spirit and the fellowship grew up about you, you know they're not talking about the fellowship of AA or the fellowship of HA. They're talking about the fellowship of the Spirit, and you recognize them by the signature of the Spirit they carry. So that's an experience you must not miss because that's vital. That's my vital sixth sense. That's the source of life within me. Yes? Okay. Trying to help tie it all together for you. Is it helping? Or do I got two heads? I'm seeing? Okay. All right. So we know you'll not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. So how many of you have discovered that? Okay. So even if you're not particularly in fellowships of recovery, you're in fellowships of your church or you're in a fellowship around here, and as you start to appreciate how important you are to one another, it really is a lift, yes? Okay. So perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. You think that's true in Phoenix, Arizona today? We kind of chuckle, but think about it. How many of you have met people who do not seemingly want to recover in places that you find it weird to find them? I've heard arguments for years in recovery fellowships that we do not recover. You're always recovering. You never recover. Well, when they wrote this book, they declared it. Of course, it wasn't a medical diagnosis then, so I suppose from a clinical standpoint, you are always recovering. But from a spiritual standpoint, you're recovered. You're redeemed. Does that make sense? So we're talking about two different things here. Some of you felt that. Who felt that? That was the Redeemer. That wasn't the speaker. If you felt it in you, that's you know who's got you, right? All right. So It says you can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. They'll be only too glad to assist you. How many of you have found that medical professionals, clinical professionals, when they're dealing with somebody that's an addict in active addiction, they just as soon hand them off to you? Doctors don't like dealing with us. How many of you have dealt with doctors when you're in active addiction? How many of you got told you were exhibiting drug-seeking behavior? Kind of the way they got the fucking system set up, ain't it? That's my new dope dealer. Got to go. Okay. All right, so they'll be only too glad to assist you. Don't start out as an evangelist or reformer. What do they mean? My walk and my willingness to serve is my evangelism, not so much my talk, right? And if I'm a reformer, I'm talking about the evils of alcohol, the evils of drugs, right? And quite frankly, alcohol and drugs always did for me precisely what I wanted them to do for me. So I got no beef with drugs and alcohol, right? That I eventually wasn't tough enough to carry that sucker all the way out. They whipped me, but okay. All right, so unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You'll be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish, but it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. They warned us back in 1 that the alcoholic, the addict, properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the confidence of another in a few hours. And until such a meeting has been accomplished, nothing can be accomplished. So it's, again, I'm not evangelizing or I'm not reforming, but I know the unique experience of addiction. Does that make sense? I know what it's like to behave in ways I don't even recognize. Yes? Okay. All right, so cooperate, never criticize, to be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. How do you do that? Yeah, listen to him. Right? We always like to go about talking to them, but we tend to, because we think we can talk them out of something, we're not that powerful. And if people have been around our fellowships, they'll think they know how to impress us. Have you had that happen? I just need someone who's going to be tough on me. I need a lot of direction. You ain't ready. If you already know what you need, you don't need God. But from the fact that you came to me, I'm guessing you do need God. So quit trying to impress me, because I ain't he. I'm just his ambassador. So don't waste time trying to persuade them. You may spoil a later opportunity. See, we try and think that we can avert suffering for them when they're not demonstrating any faith themselves. I think if you guys are Bible students, even the Lord himself credited their faith, not his, when people got healed. And those of you who are not Bible students, just take that bit of wisdom as fact. If you don't, or they don't, meet me at least with some percentage of willingness on their own, once they've been shown unconditional love, there ain't much anyone can do for them. Right? There's going to be some stuff you got to do to participate, yes? And that ain't any reason to hate on them. It's still teaching me powerlessness. Yes? Okay. All right, so this advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they're dealing with a sick person. So if they don't want to work, but they've called you because their family member is disturbing to them, you can tell that family member of your redemption and give them hope. Because they can seek the same power. They're suffering in the same addiction, but they're watching it outside of themselves, same as you. There's no reason not to minister to the family. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to jump over to the next page, and I'm going to stay in the middle of that page, 91, middle of the page, because where most of us are going to start meeting people, at least initially in meetings and places like this or whatever. So what they suggest is see your man alone if possible. So how many of you have discovered that can be a little difficult when you meet him in a meeting hall? So how do y'all do it, those of you that are working with people? Come on, this is your meeting. This isn't Joe's meeting. This is y'all's meeting. This is an interactive thing. See, I ask questions, you respond. That's how this...
You'll have
Yeah, you do. You take them somewhere, right? The meeting before the meeting, the meeting after the meeting. You want to, right? That's the deal. We're going to go chat. Okay? At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. So you're steering the conversation, but not a direct assault. How many of you have found that a better approach? Yeah? Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. Do you know, are you properly armed with the facts about yourself? Do you know your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences? Do you realize the insanity of addiction starts before you put stuff in your body? A lot of people don't seem to know that. How many of you are disturbed by life and holding on to grievance, hanging on to resentment? The insanity of addiction is alive and well in you if you are. Does that make sense? So if we're running around actively in our control addiction, mad at other people for behaving like people, we're on our way to a drink. Make sense? So what are my symptoms once I take a drink? I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. Instead of sedating me, it energizes me. Any of you drinkers? Did you ever experience being energized by alcohol? That's an abnormal reaction to a sedative. Where's my opiate addicts? Did you have them fooled? They thought you were doing really good when you got a little bump, didn't they? You're out mowing the lawn with the vacuum cleaner. Okay. So I have this abnormal reaction once I put it in my body, but long before I put it in my body, the insanity sets in, my addiction to control. And I'm trying to arrange the lights, the scenery, and the ballet, and the rest of the players in my own way, and I stay in grievance. And the sunlight, the spirit is blocked from me, yeah? Okay. So it says, tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. What if he doesn't? That's beautiful. That's exactly right. Show him love, unconditional. Sometimes you just want to sit with someone in silence and be silent and not feel judged. You'll thus get a better idea how you ought to proceed. How many of you sitting there in silence with somebody, letting them feel their pain, got inspiration in the Spirit and you knew how to proceed? If I'm not so sure I know how to proceed, the Spirit will tell me how to proceed. Have you ever noticed that? Okay. If he's not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. Why not? What's that, Lance?
I don't know how it was accomplished.
You guys agree with him? If we get honest with ourselves and we were really addicts of the hopeless variety, we have no clue how me getting free of that daily moment-by-moment insanity was accomplished. I drank every day, no matter what. I didn't stop unless I was handcuffed or chained down or somehow restrained, and then one day, pow, it never happened again. Some of you felt that, huh? We love the pow around here, don't we? So it's above our pay grade to talk about how it was accomplished, but it's an interesting talking point, isn't it? So we're not going to say anything till they ask, and then when they ask, they're going to get the pow. Right? Okay. All right. So it says, if he's in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. So what's that look like? How many of you have had liquor or drugs cause you trouble? How many of you can talk about it without disparaging yourself or them? You know, the thing about it is if we're properly armed with the facts about ourselves, one of the things we know as we engage in this process is self is dying in this process. So what's happening through me isn't me at all. So I can talk dispassionately about that guy because I can be respectful of the dead. Does it make sense? I mean, what are we awakened to? The goal of 12-step recovery is not abstinence, it's waking up. What are we awakened to? We awaken to the fact that I'm dead and he lives in me. I still think like me, but I act better than me. What's the explanation for that?
God's will, not yours.
Yeah, well, we talk about that, but that's absolutely right. Because I'm no longer in disagreement with God's will, even when it's uncomfortable for me. Right? There's really no opposite to God's will. We got to get our head around that. There's God's will and my disagreement with it. Once I awaken to that fact, then when I find myself in disagreement with what is, I start seeking power within. In the last analysis, it's only there that he may be found. Yeah? Okay. All right. So it says that if his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. Get him to tell some of his. How many of you got humorous stories of your escapades? We all do. But when we first get here and we're tore up from the floor up, sometimes nothing funny, huh? So we got to weigh that. How many of you got here and there wasn't nothing funny? Nothing funny to me when I got here. But now, looking back, laughing at that silly guy that I was, it's kind of a trip. Okay. All right. So get him to tell some of his. When he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were and how you finally learned that you were sick. So that's how this whole process of doing an inventory, it's not for the benefit of the person helping me with it, it's for the benefit of me to learn the facts about me so I can bear witness properly to exactly how I learned I was sick. How baffled was I? How many of you didn't like the idea of an allergy? It was silly. You heard people in meetings, I drink and I break out in handcuffs. Yeah, it was a stupid allergy thing. But when someone probably pointed out to you that you were just having an abnormal reaction and you really did have that going on, therefore you're off the hook, at least for your response, because it's a physical ailment that's going to require either a healing or an abstinence, one of the two. Yes? But the mental obsession that won't allow you to stop doing that which you know is harmful is going to require a redirection that is beyond your human control. Yes? Okay. So it was a little baffling when I went places and people said, "What'd you do today to stay sober?" And I'm saying, I've tried everything. Anyone know what I'm talking about? I went to the meetings. I sat down with people. I poured my heart out, and then I went back out to the car and I got the bottle out from under the seat and I poured it down my neck. So, give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. I just did that for you. If you're holding on to grievance, you're getting in thinking all of life is wrong, all of a sudden you're setting yourself up. You're blocking yourself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. That's why resentment's the number one offender. By the time we're in 12, you're supposed to be in the all-inclusive manner of living suggested by these guys walk. Does it make sense? So I'm disciplining my thoughts on the fly so I don't block myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. We suggest you do this as we've done on the chapter on alcoholism. If he's alcoholic, he'll understand you at once. He'll match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. So we're going to take him on a fishing trip. The first thing you'd have to do is have read at least the chapter on alcoholism and all the different stories they told and see if anyone relates. So they always tell us the story about the jaywalker. Any of you relate to the jaywalker? He just keeps doing it a little more until he gets more and more beat up, and it all makes perfect sense to him, but nobody else watching. How about Jim the car guy? Any of you relate to Jim the car guy? He owned a car dealership, didn't drink till he was 35, but once he started drinking at 35, found out he was damn good at it. And he ended up losing the car dealership he owned and had to go back to work for it, even though he once owned it. Any of you ever lost a good job because of your addiction and had to take a less good job? Okay, well, Jim did that, and he was on his way to work one morning, and he was a little agitated. Any of you ever been a little agitated on your way to a job that wasn't quite what you thought you should have? Look at who I'm talking to. A whole room full of people who work for 13 cents an hour, right? So on his way to this job, he gets a little agitated. When he gets there, he has a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Any of you ever had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious? After that little skirmish, he decides that although he's at the car dealership where people come to buy cars, he's going to go out in the woods looking for people to buy cars that don't come to dealerships. Perfectly logical conclusion, right? So on his way out to these woods where car buyers that don't come to dealerships hang out, he passes a roadside place where he's eaten many times. And oh, by the way, they have a bar. But that's not a problem because he does not pick up no matter what. Any of you ever been in that mode? So he wanders in and he orders a sandwich and a glass of milk. And then the thought came to him, I'll order another sandwich and glass of milk and a shot of whiskey. Because if I put that shot of whiskey in my milk, it can't hurt me on a full stomach. Now that is a perfectly logical conclusion to reach for a person who doesn't know they have an abnormal reaction that's going to cause them to not be able to stop. So what happened, according to Jim's storytellers, is the experiment went so well that he had another. And then another trip to the asylum for Jim. So any of you relate to that? I know a lot of people focus on the whiskey and the milk, and they go, I don't put whiskey, I'm not a drinker. How many of you had some clean time and went to the dope house just to show the fellows how good you're doing? Did you get a similar result? A week later, you're still in the same trap house? Okay, so we roughly identify with Jim. If you never took it that far, then I can't even think of the other guy's name that went to New York and he didn't drink. He just, I'm done. I learned it from the alcoholics. I don't have to do that. I never took it that far, but he had a successful day, walked through the lobby of the hotel, walked into the restaurant, decided to have a few highballs with dinner. He came to a few days later in a cab. Any of you ever do something like that where you weren't fully aware of your condition? Where's my polite heroin users? Weekenders. Ended up with a sentence. Okay, so if you're relating to me, I got to read this to you, and I want to apologize in advance. You just caught alcoholism. If you're satisfied that he's a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. What is the hopeless feature of the malady? Self-knowledge isn't going to fix it. It's never going to get any better. It's going to get worse, never better. I'm going to have a mind that continually tells me that I'm in control when I've never been in control. Yeah? Show him from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Again, the first drink is the act of insanity. Everything that happened after that's not insanity. That's just the shit that happens to people who drink like me. That's just a consequence of being the kind of drinker or drugger I am. Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he's seen it and wishes to discuss it, and be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can if he's not too alcoholic. So we're really not throwing them under the bus. We just want them to convince us now. I've already borne witness to me. Now you tell me why we should spend any more time. Right? I've told a lot of people that. Especially people that quit around Christmas. They quit on the 24th. I go, oh, what a piker. You ought to be able to make it to New Year's anyway. Come on, convince me. How many of you thought you could pick your sobriety date? How many of you missed it by a decade or two? So that's an experience you must have. It's not for me to give it to you. Okay, all right. So insist that if he's severely afflicted, there may be a little chance he can recover by himself. I'm not throwing him under the bus. I can tell him, look, I thought like you. I once thought and felt as you do, but I doubt I'd made much progress had I not taken action. Here's the action I took. Here's what I experienced as a result. If you're interested, I can walk you through it. And if you're not, we'll part friends. Okay? All right, so to continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady, and talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Can you do that without talking to them in Alcoholics Anonymous? Because if we just go into a speech on craving and obsession, we sound like everybody else everywhere. I've got to talk to them about what it felt like, what I thought like, and what happened to me as a result, in spite of my intention for that not to happen over and over again. The conditions of mind and body. How many of you were absolutely convinced it wasn't safe to have even one? I'm through forever. How many of you in the course of the next day or weeks thought perhaps I overreacted? How many of you, once you started putting in your body, no matter how many rules you set for yourself, you broke your own rules? So I didn't say craving or obsession, but I just described an experience we've all had. Right? Okay. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it'll serve some good purpose. But you may talk to them about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. So that sounds like a promise, but that's really a statement of responsibility. Because I've got to be properly armed with my facts about myself, and I've got to tell the truth with grace. What is the solution? A lot of people get baffled with that. I'm not offering them a meeting list, and I'm not offering them a new process to go through. I'm offering them the solution within me. The power to live within me that I have discovered as a result of the process. The solution I have to offer you is that which led me to you. Just the way it is. The solution is God consciousness, because that expresses itself through me as spiritual inebriation. And since I'm dependent by nature, I had to switch what I was dependent on, and so I have switched my dependence from chemicals, synthetic, worldly things to otherworldly experiences. How many of you were drinkers? How many of you didn't want to eat when you were drunk because you didn't want to wreck the bus? So the more you grow in the spirit, you won't want to eat of worldly things because you don't want to wreck the bus. Because you're dependent by nature, and we just are really good at not wrecking the bus once we figured out the... All right. So you'll soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, the traits of the alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he's alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he's become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question if he will. So we're just leading them up to a point that they will ask, because all it's going to sound like nonsense. Don't be afraid to sound like nonsense. All things of the Spirit sound like nonsense to people of the world. So you're going to have to talk to them in truth and trust that the power led you to them, and they're going to feel you when they can't hear you anyway. Yes? Okay. Same thing that happened for y'all. You know you're in here by accident. How many of you guys realize this has never been advertised? No, but here you are. Anyway, tell him exactly what happened to you. So are you armed with the facts? Can I tell exactly what happened? I told you a little bit about it. I used and drank every day no matter what. I passed out in cars in August in Phoenix. Paramedics yanked me out. I was in a coma for a week. I was awakened from that coma and had to be rehabbed so I could feed myself and do whatever. And the minute I got to where I could stand on my feet and move my hands to my face, I asked if I could go out and smoke, and I walked across the parking lot and got a beer with my ass hanging out. That's who I was. And then one day I went through that experience again, and I ended up in a residential detox of some sort. And a guy came in and he spoke to me of this book like I'm speaking to you. And he hit me with so much power in my fog, I knew if he would tell me what it is he knew, that I would never be that guy again. I've never been that guy again from that minute. That was a lot of years ago, and look at what's going on now. And that all credit to God. The same reason you guys have a house to come to when you come from where you come from, right? This was all a vision given to us years ago to create a place for people to come home, to get ready to re-enter, and then learn about God not through our word, but through our walk. So stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic he does not have to agree with your conception of God. They put that in italics. Why not? Yeah, God's not a concept anyway. God's an experience. So you don't have to agree with me. Walk with me. If you don't believe that there's a healing power flowing through this place and through these people, walk with me. The lame walk. The deaf hear. The blind see. The captives are set free. Every day, right here, middle of Phoenix. Kenny, am I telling the truth? Okay? And we encourage you. Kenny will walk with you. Chap will walk with you. Denise, Matt, Trina, any of us, Jim, if you look around you, Rashawn, Robert, we will walk with you. We'll show you. If you don't believe, if you're having trouble, walk with us. We'll show you. Okay. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. It's okay for you to be in a conception when you're first getting met, and it should be logical. So don't listen to the nonsense in the fellowships that it's a group of drunks or it's a doorknob, because that power is not found inside of you, that's outside of you. I need you to have access to power within you. You already have it, I just want you to wake up to it. Okay? All right, so the main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. Again, I have to point out to you, if you're not willing to believe in a power greater than yourself, you're in the wrong room. You're wasting valuable high time. And I'm not talking about a theology. I'm talking about if you don't think the chemicals that chased your ass in here are power greater than you, we got nothing more to talk about. There's no reason to do the steps. Just go forth and shoot heroin like a gentleman. Logical, right? When dealing with such a person, you'd better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. The spiritual principles we're talking about is to learn to observe without judgment. Watch, ask, discuss, turn. Pray, meditate, pray, pause when agitated or doubtful, pray, meditate, pray. It's not the long list Bill wrote 15 years later. No matter how many times we're taught that, it's not it. It's all contained in this book, or they wouldn't have written this book 15 years before the other one. And the principles you're going to live by are within you anyway. All we want to do is wake up to that source of life within you. Okay, so it says there is no use in arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues no matter what your own convictions are. So I don't have to tell you what you need to believe, but I can definitely tell you what properly armed with the facts about myself, what I believe, one-on-one. It's not a mystery what I believe, who I believe in, and how I came to that conclusion. And I'm happy to share that with you if you want to know, and I'm happy to let you have your beliefs as long as you want to hold them. Does that make sense? Okay. I believe based on the relationship I've formed and the experience I've had as a result. That's why I believe. So it doesn't matter to me if you don't. I'm good with you not believing. You haven't had the experience I've had, I guess. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he's going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. How many of you have worked with people that were perhaps overly religious? That can get in the way, can't it? And yet they're dying in their addiction. So it's okay to point that out to them, because your biblical knowledge is stunning. But clearly you are not practicing the principles you know so well, or you would not be dying in addiction. So perhaps we could review. Guys, I've sat down. I got one guy, I've told this story before. I was sitting down with a guy who was a rabbinical student. He was pretty close to whatever level of, he was going to be a rabbi soon if he could just put down the meth pipe. And so this dude was dialed in, and all of a sudden, the Spirit started speaking to me, through me, to him, and we started talking about things from the Torah and from all kinds of texts. And he goes, "Wait a minute. How do you know that?" I said, "I already told you weren't talking to me. I don't know that." And then some of you are feeling what I'm telling you. He felt it too. He's like, "Oh, okay." So anyway, that kind of stuff happens for us around here and throughout our life if we just grow up in it, right? And I mean grow up in it. So I'm going to jump from there because we're going to run out of time. I'm going to go to 94. Why would I want to do the steps? Yeah, right. I got to find a power by which I can live. I got a power in me that clearly wants me dead, and I get a glimpse of a desire to live from time to time. I need to awaken to the power that wants to live and let that one that wants to die go away. Yeah? And so I went through the process because I'm going to tap into something. So I'm not the guy that can go home and think about it because there's a lot of places for me to get waylaid on the way. I could never get clear home. Any of you know what I'm talking about? I could go sit in the meeting, I could profess it all, but I couldn't get clear home because I knew what was up. Yeah, I had to get free. Anyway, and so someone took me, I was talking to a guy from New York today. He says, "So what does it take you, about a month to get guys through?" I said, "Guys, our guys don't have a month. We try and get them through in a day or so. If you got a month, you're not serious." Sorry. I never had a fucking month. Explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. Why am I now endeavoring, if I'm being honest? Because nothing so much ensures immunity as intensive work with others. You are an important part of my recovery, and God led me to you. And whatever it is I'm dishing to you, I'm going to get a hit on the way by, and I need the healing. Yep. All right, so it's important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery, just like I just did for you. I'm not here because I'm a saint. I'm here because I desperately want to be better than I once was. Okay? Actually, he may be helping you more than you're helping him. How many of you have discovered that? Where do we learn that? We learn that when they go twist off and die and we didn't. I got the benefits of whatever it was I got to deliver to them. I got the benefits and they apparently did not. And I'm not saying that in any disparaging way. I'm just saying I learned it really profoundly when I see what happens to people who just don't get it. Make it plain he's under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he'll try and help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Why do I hope that for him? That's when the unpacking is going to happen. A lot of people think the 4 and 5 is where it happens, but nope, 12 is where it happens. That's where every gnarly experience I ever had gets put to purpose to avert suffering for another. So I hope you'll do it, because otherwise you just got a garbage collection that you haven't done anything with. Right? How many of you have done an inventory and it still sucked? Until you go put it to purpose, yes? And then you realize that all of that was preparation. All right, so suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own, and make it clear that he's not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he's helped you more than you've helped him. So how many of you have had that happen? So remember, you're guaranteed a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps as long as you show up. So they did not waste your time. There's a spiritual lesson in there for you regardless. If they tell you they're going to work with someone else and it makes you mad, which happens to all of us, that means I had an attachment to something that wasn't mine to attach to. Right? Okay. All right, so So he's helped you more than you've helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you perhaps made a friend. How many of you had a few approaches with somebody, then one day you saw them all cleaned up, and they said, man, if I hadn't run into you a few years ago, I would have never known. It took me a while, but come on, I see a lot of you nodding. You've had that experience, right? It's not our decision of when they're going to get well, but it's always our decision whether I'm going to serve when I'm shown. Right? Okay. So you've perhaps made a friend. Maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He'll be more likely to follow your suggestions. So how many of you had to go process what someone told you about the AA or whatever? It's like, I'm not going to jump in right now. I got to go process this nonsense. This sounds pretty drastic. How many of you went and assessed your condition and realized, I need to do something? Okay, that's all they're talking about. Let them. You cannot fully concede your innermost self, the first step of recovery, based on a lie. So it's going to have to be between you and God ultimately, and then I'll show you how to walk it out if it's your decision. Yes? Okay. All right, so it says your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. You ever had that happen? How many did you have? Does anyone know that there really is no all the program? It's a manner of living. I agree in 3 that as long as I have breath in my lungs, I will advocate for my brother or sister when called upon. That's it. That's my role. So there's no rest of the program. There's no working the steps. They don't say, here are the steps we worked. They say, here are the steps we took. Don't get it twisted. It's not a workbook exercise. It's a manner of living, a disciplined thought life, an active life of service. Okay? He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. How many of you have had that happen? Come on, everybody here has gone, I ain't saying that shit to nobody. Anybody? How many of you thought you had something that no one had ever heard? Or maybe you still do. Does it have a name? If what you did has a name, someone did it before you. Do not contradict such views. Tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. On your first visit, tell him about the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the things they did really well back then is they differentiated between fellowship and program. The fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is like this. We come together in common purpose, and we have a laugh, and maybe we have a cry, and we support one another. It has nothing to do with the manner of living. It's just an add-on. When I want to talk to them about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I lend them a copy of my book, because that's the only place the program is discussed. Almost never discussed with any clarity in the fellowship. Does that make sense? That's why we do this for you guys that are here, in case you've been fed some deception and it didn't work for you. God will work for you. And he will put you to work for him. Okay, so it said, let's go from there over to 96. It says, do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. How many of you have worked with a few people and had your prospect not respond at once? So what they say is search out another alcoholic and try again. You're sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. So one of the things is it needs to be their desperation, not mine. How many of you have seen somebody you wanted to help for your own selfish reasons and they wouldn't get it, but someone you really didn't want to help because of your own judgments, all of a sudden grasped it and got well? Probably every one of us were that guy when they walked in and go, that guy's never going to get it. I guarantee you I was. But if someone's paying attention, I accepted with eagerness what they offered when they finally hit me with a dose of truth. Not the nonsense I hear, the truth. Right? Okay. So we find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If we leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he'd continued to work on them, he may have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. So those of you that haven't been through this book before, they're talking about Bill Wilson. He worked in the Bowery in New York. He was really discouraged, and his wife pointed out to him, "You damn fool, you're not drunk." And then he went on to Akron, and he met Bob, and all of us and all the millions that have come up until now would have been deprived their chance if he'd have clung to what he thought were failures. So when we have to walk away from somebody, we're not firing them, we're not being mean, we just don't have a right to pick. We gotta see what the Father has us doing and go where we're led. Yeah? All right. So I want to jump from there over to 97 because we're going to run out of time. It says, never avoid these responsibilities. So what they did is they went through a whole bunch of things about taking people in our homes, giving them money, doing all those types of things that we all do as community, yes? It says, never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you're doing the right thing if you assume them. So how do I know? Back to our question about what's good and what's bad. And how do I know? Now that I'm tapped into the Spirit, I can run everything against the Spirit. Does that make sense? That's why at this point I'm awakened. All I got to do, pray, meditate, pray, pause when agitated or doubtful, do not struggle. The right answers will come if we want them. That's what all that preparation was for, is so I can serve effectively. Okay? So helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. So how important are they? There's another book that says, whatever you do for these brothers and sisters of mine, you do unto me. So that's the foundation stone of my recovery, is whatever I do for the least of these. Because I are the least of these. Yet I've been redeemed. Yeah? Okay. So a kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. So you guys know the story of the Good Samaritan? The least likely guy to help, right? But he did help. He did more than help. He bandaged the wounds. He took him to the inn. He paid the tab, said he'd be back in a few days to settle up. He took responsibility for his brother. Okay? Every day if need be. How many of you found that can be a pain in the ass? How many of you worked with a lot of people? Got a call at an inopportune moment. I'm the only one. You guys don't want to... How many of you got that 2 o'clock in the morning call? The drunk dial. Well, you don't understand. No, I fucking understand. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money, your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. How many of you had other people have to come to you at hospitals, jails, and asylums? How many even had visits from people you didn't know who came to comfort you at hospitals, jails, and asylums? That's why 9 was prepping me for the big amends, which is 12, because all the experiences I've benefited from brothers and sisters who came to give me comfort in my depths, I now owe that unending debt going forward. Does it make sense? Okay. So it says, your wife may sometimes say she's neglected. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. You may have to fight with him if he's violent. And sometimes you'll have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally you'll have to meet such conditions. The guy that took me through the steps initially told me that was the 12-step promises. Basically what that is just a job description for the job I took in 3, right? I have a new employer, and being all-powerful, he provides what I need if I keep close to him and perform my work well. And now I know that keeping close to him is building consciousness, and now I'm out serving. Make sense? Not my direction, but his direction. All right. So it says, we seldom allow an alcoholic to live in our homes for a long time. It's not good for him, and it sometimes creates serious complications in a family. So we don't want to overhelp. It's a hand up, not a hand out, because we don't want them dependent on us. Yes? Okay. I'm going to jump from there over to 98. And last week we talked about 10 and 11. We talked about growing in understanding and effectiveness. And I said understanding of what, effectiveness at what. And then I promised you this week we'd take a look at what we're growing in effectiveness at, and now they're going to tell us in 12. Make sense? Now we're serving. So it's not the matter of giving that's in question, but when and how to give. How many of you have had people give you rules for how you should give? How many of you have broken said rules because you could see your brother and sister needed something different? How many of you have offered them prayer when they ask for something else? How many of you have given them money and someone says, you're just going to spend it on drugs? Yeah, that's what I'd do. Who do we get our rules from now? Power within. I know I'm telling you what to do or how to do it. I mean, it might be nicer if they're hungry, take them for a meal, sit down with them, show them some fellowship. But if you don't have time for that or whatever, I got a book that tells me give to everyone who asks of me. Not necessarily what they ask, right? Okay. All right, so that often makes a difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. So I would cheat them to talk to them about the power I call God without a demonstration. So I can speak to them, I can speak over them, I can pray with them, I can even give them enough money for some comfort, but I can also tell them who they are and whose they are, and that will go with them. That will go with them. God, he clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. So how many of you have had that happen? There's no way I'm going to get sober unless I have a house or a car. How many of you went and got high when you didn't have a house or a car? So that's silly. Nonsense. How many of you had a house and a car and you went out and got high until you didn't? How many of you stopped getting high right on that moment? So circumstances got nothing to do with any of that nonsense, right? Okay. So it says, some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth, job or no job, wife or no wife. We simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence upon God. That's why I always point out this nonsense that we talk about, good orderly direction, because it is such a falsehood and it's so detrimental. The power is found in you. I'm not here to convince you to come to a meeting or a room. What I'm telling you is I wouldn't have been sent to you if you didn't desperately need the power that I'm talking to you about. And if you don't want it, I can accept it. But if you do, then walk with me and I'll show you how it manifests in your life and mine. So it says, burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. How many of you learned that? The only condition that he trusts in God and clean house. So, when we say God, what do we mean? Power. Trust in power and clean house, and the power is improved as you get rid of the pomp, circumstance, right? All the stuff that's blocking your consciousness. Okay. So I want to jump from there. How are we doing? We're not very far. We can't go much further. Okay, I'm going to go to page 103. And I'm going to just read the very last sentence. That's all in italics. I think that's a good closing. After all, our problems were of our own making. How many of you, armed with the facts about yourself, know that even though you may have been mistreated and what have you, you hung on to grievance too long, you allowed things to fester? Yeah, so a lot of your problems are of your own making. How many of you have been sober a while and still realize that a lot of your problems are of your own making? So bottles were only a symbol, so the reason I call that to your attention is that was just a symptom of my underlying malady, my storm within, yeah? So besides, we have stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to. So profound. This is for you. We've stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to, because it's pure illusion. I've got to discipline my thought. Got to discipline my thought. Not because it's a rule, but because I'm dependent by nature and I need that source. Yeah? That's it. Thanks. We'll see you next week.